Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Looky here, we are on video, simulcast with the audio. Thomas Miller, Robert Glasscock, we're doing this on video now. We've been talking about moving in this direction. We'll still slip some audio onlys in there when we need to, but we're going to try to do some video podcasts. And we have a great listener question to kick this one off.
I was wondering if you could talk about the astrology of the California fires. With Mars being retrograde and its detriment, I think this would be a great topic.
Now, Robert, obviously, she's talking about January of 2025. I'm close to it. I'm about 90 miles, let's say, broadly from where all the action is. And it has been an absolute tragedy in Los Angeles. And I think she's got a really good point here is to take a look at the chart because it does show some significant things about these fires.
Yeah, let's do it. It's very emotional for me, Thomas, as you know. I lived in LA for 30 years, and everywhere I lived while I was there for 30 years, everywhere is on fire right now. So it's very close to the bone.
Gosh, that's like reliving all those memories through
every bit of it.
And you had been through earthquakes, which, yeah. So I know we'll talk about the earthquakes here coming up. So this chart that we're going to operate from is dated April 4th, 1850. And I got this off of astro.com, which if you're ever looking for a chart, astro.com is the mothership. So this is a birth time or, birth natal chart of Los Angeles, but a time of this city incorporation. That's what this was. When they incorporated Los Angeles is not known. So we set it up as a solar chart. And if you notice on the inside of the ring here, the sun is right on the ascendant point. And that's what we're going to be using for this analysis.
Starting with the fact that there is this gigundous stellium in Aries. I hope the listeners understand what a solar chart is. You have one too. We all do. Simply place the sun in your natal horoscope on the first cusp, and you have your solar chart, and you should read it. They're just as valid as your time birth chart. So since we don't have an exact time for Los Angeles, this solar chart is the most valid that we can use. And you've got this Mercury in Aries, Saturn, the Sun, Venus, Uranus, Pluto, all in Aries. And this characterizes the entire city from day one. Aries is a fire sign. It is a sign of new starts. LA is known for ignoring its history and rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding on top of it. It's always new. Something is dying and something is being reborn constantly in LA. So these fires are nothing new, nor are the Santa Ana winds that accompany them at this time of the year. And the topography of Los Angeles with the mountain ranges and the canyons whips those Santa Ana winds up to 80 and 100 miles an hour. So the least little spark can trigger this. And this goes back throughout the history of Los Angeles. Many writers have talked about the Santa Ana season and what it does to people psychologically. So this city, every day of its life, I lived there 30 years. It's subliminal, but there is the constant threat of earthquake and fire, constant. And that contributes to a certain psychology in the city itself. So here, as the listener very accurately pointed out, transiting Mars in Cancer triggers this Aries stellium. It's exactly triggering Pluto on the day these fires started. And Pluto is extremes in astrology. Now, bear in mind, Mars, transiting Mars, will trigger this stellium once every 2 years, because that's how long it takes Mars to go all the way around the zodiac. So what makes it different this time? This is the most tragic fire in Los Angeles history. Well, one of the things that makes it different is if you begin to look at the other transits going on. Mars is the trigger, But notice transiting Uranus at 23 Taurus, square Los Angeles's nodal axis. The north and south nodes are at 22 Aquarius Leo. So that's a long-term transit. Uranus will be squaring those nodes for several days. And then along comes transiting Mars. Bam! And transiting Mars triggers natal Pluto, which in this horoscope for Los Angeles rules Scorpio on the 8th house of death and rebirth, of destruction and rebirth. Scorpio, the phoenix rising from the ashes. And that's Mars, triggering the ruler of the 8th. Well, again, Mars will do that every 2 years. But this year, at the same time, transiting Uranus was triggering the nodes, which are karmic. So this incredible tragedy is the end result of a buildup of all sorts of factors. But the transits here are pretty clear. With transiting Uranus, which rules earthquakes as well as natural disasters, sudden natural disasters, earthquake and Uranus are associated and square the nodes in, again, Leo and Aquarius. And those happen to rule the economy of LA, which is all structured primarily around the entertainment industry. Almost every business in Los Angeles is either directly or indirectly connected to that business. Restaurants, bars, taxi, public transportation, hotels, on and on and on, are all connected with this enormous business of entertainment, which of course is the 5th house of creativity, which is what LA and Hollywood are known for, and the media. So along comes Mars and triggers it, Mars being in the 4th house of the Los Angeles solar chart, home and property. And Mars, of course, rules Aries. Mars is a fire planet. Aries is a fire sign. And in this chart, you've got 6 planets in Aries, all clustered around the life force of the city, the sun, in Aries. So here you see, pretty graphically, through astrology, the explosion of fires. It's absolutely a disaster that Los Angeles has never faced. Will they rebuild? Yes, they will.
You know, this is so interesting. Let me show you a couple of things that I saw here as well as this was unfolding. And of course, I was kind of glued to it as a former news person, news anchor. I was a news junkie here for a few days. But in addition, transiting Pluto, which is sitting at that very delicate 1 degree Aquarius, having just moved in there, is also opposite that Mars. Now they were separating; they had already that opposition had already perfected, but it was, I think, definitely a dynamic. And with Mars in retrograde, of course, it's moving backwards in Cancer, and then it's going to come back again across that exact opposition before it continues on. So that was an additional factor. And then there was one more. This is Tuesday's chart. This is about when the fire began. And notice the moon is over in Aries, of course, sitting on top of that big stellium. But by by Monday, actually, the following week, so 1 week later, that moon had moved over to Cancer and was sitting almost conjunct, just a couple of degrees off of that Mars for the full moon. So that added, I think, a little bit extra combustion to this as well.
Those are great points, especially with the Mars retrograde, because it's retrograde now, and I'm just looking here to see exactly when it turns direct, which it turns direct at the end of February. So, by timing, my friends, this entire situation is not going to be ended, if you can even call it that, until the end of next month. And it's still burning. which is one of the points. So you can follow the Mars transit, as Thomas was pointing out, because it's going to turn direct on February the 23rd. It doesn't clear Pluto, transiting Pluto, until April, the second half of April. So we're going now. Pluto also has financial connotations. So all of these people who have lost these homes, the insurance, we're talking so far, the last I read, something like a $150 billion disaster. Insurance only covers a part of that. So these people are responsible, after the insurance caps, of paying to rebuild the rest of their homes if they can, out of their own pockets. So now you begin to get a picture, as Thomas pointed out here with transiting Mars, how long the repercussions of this are going to be in effect. So it's affecting the foundations of the city in the fourth house, the security of the city. We're talking already about people looting. So the ramifications of this are not over by a long shot here. And we really won't know, probably until more like the end of February, the total cost in terms of human lives and financial devastation.
Those are all excellent points, and it has been such a tragedy. And I mean, just to see it on the news unfolding, it's kind of interesting, Robert. This year, just 2024, I moved out of North Carolina just before Hurricane Helene, and now watching this from about nearly 100 miles away in 2025. It's just been like the two biggest kind of disaster stories of the decade, the century. How far back do you want to go? And here I was almost in one and almost in another. It's kind of like, wow. But I would like to just make another point here as we circle Uranus. This is transiting Uranus. This is LA Uranus. And we've already talked about that being in a square to natal Mars. And then you mentioned the natal Uranus, or the transiting Uranus, in the square to the nodes. A lot of people out here are saying that they're concerned. Locals are concerned. And you went through so many of these, as you mentioned in the beginning. Earthquakes, that there could be, connected even with the fire, the potential for the ground to shake. And ironically, as the full moon was occurring, we just pointed that out, as the full moon was occurring here, there was a 6.2 earthquake down on the Mexican coast in the Baja, which is on the line of the San Andreas Fault.
And you're absolutely right, Thomas. This increases the risks of major earthquakes and even tsunamis.
Wow.
So there's
what a
that.
time.
Second of all, 2024 is the hottest year on record around the world. So with Los Angeles and fires and earthquakes, these natural disasters are very likely to increase in both frequency and scope.
Wow. Well,
now, Uranus is moving toward Aries. Toward Gemini.
Right.
And Saturn is moving toward Aries.
And Neptune.
So you look at the Los Angeles chart that's loaded with this Aries stellium.
Wow.
This is in February of 26 when Saturn goes into Aries, and it will be in Aries for 2.5 years. So when you're looking at this fire and its repercussions on Los Angeles, the lives, the economy, the real estate, all of it, we haven't begun to see the end results of this yet. This is all not only fresh, it's still ongoing. Still ongoing.
Well, so is North Carolina, and that happened back in the spring, so almost a year ago. This is a multi-year, probably multi-decade kind of event that has taken place. That's just amazing. Well, I know, as you mentioned in the very beginning, that this brings back a lot of memories of a lot of shakes and rattles and rolls and things that you experienced firsthand, and it's just phenomenal that all the places, as you said, that you lived have been exposed to these fires. That's just an incredible situation. Hey, thanks for your thoughts, and a big hug virtually across the across half the country, because this has been tough for all of us. Thank you for a great question to our listener. If you'd like to do what she did, you can go to funastrology.com. In the upper left is an orange button, and if you click it, you can leave us a message, just like she did. Thank you for listening. We'll see you, and watching. Goodness, we have to say watching now as well. We'll see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast with the GOAT right over there, Robert Glasscock.